The whole world knows how the story began. A massive earthquake and tsunami on March 11, 2011, triggered a series of events that led to the worst nuclear disaster so far in the 21st century. A meltdown of 3 separate nuclear reactors. Hundreds of thousands of people were forced to abandon their homes, creating eerie ghost towns practically devoid of human life. The Tokyo Electric Power Company, called TEPCO for short, is the operator of the Fukushima Daiichi plant. They have repeatedly claimed that the disaster was not really their fault because the scale of the tsunami was beyond reasonable expectations. In fact, however, later revelations proved that experts had indeed warned them of the dangers, but that the company repeatedly declined to take the expensive countermeasures that would have been needed to mitigate or even entirely prevent the nuclear disaster. Investigatory panels employed by the government itself have now judged that the Fukushima Daiichi disaster was more the product of human error than a necessary result of the earthquake and tsunami. And yet, not a single person has been held accountable, nor has TEPCO ever been forced even to reveal all of its internal information on how the disaster came about. In short, the same people who created the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear catastrophe are the very same people who are still in charge today and are calling for the Japanese nation's nearly 50 remaining nuclear reactors to be quickly restarted. Radiation has contaminated the land. Is the food safe to eat? Is the water safe to drink? Can TEPCO and Japan's other monopolistic energy companies be trusted to serve the public interest? Are the government regulators competent to oversee the utilities and to protect the Japanese people from further harm? Most Japanese now fear that the answers to these questions may be no, and that they cannot trust their leaders to tell them the straight truth. Little wonder then that many of the normally mild-mannered Japanese are starting to become angry.
経済産業省はどういう立場に陥っているのか、どういうふうに国民と信頼関係を回復しなきゃいけないのか、そのために経済産業省は何をやらなきゃいけないのか考えれば、この最終報告を撤回して、もう一回調査をきちっとやり直す。
And as the months have passed, provoked by an unresponsive government and by unaccountable business executives, this anger has now blossomed into a massive, nationwide grassroots movement against nuclear power.
No, no, 原発 No, 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 原発 No, no, 原発原発はいらねえ命が先だろう電気は後だろう死んじまったら便利もクソもねえ命が先だろう金なんか後だろうどれだけ儲けりゃ原発やめるのかノーノー原発ノーノーノーノーノー原発ノーノー原発原発はいらねえ地震が増えてる地球が怒ってるまだわからんのかとなってる地震が増えてる今すぐやめてくれ子供たちに未来を残してくれよノーノー原発ノーノーノーノーノー原発ノーノー原発原発はいらねえノーノー原発ノーノーノーノーノー原発ノーノー原発原発はいらねえ原発は
Among the participants were many who came as entire families to express their strong feelings in opposition to the continued use of nuclear energy.
脱原発の思いを伝えにここに来ました。もう国会も東電ももう本当にいい加減で責任を取ろうとしない。今の政権がある以上は原発も稼働し続けると。ここはもう民衆っていうかな、私たちは怒ってるっていうのを数で直接この体でぶつけたいと思って今日は来ました。
There were also many who asserted that Japan's nuclear power industry has corrupted the nation's politics and its major political parties, and is even tied to U.S. power in the international sphere.
昔の自民党も今の民主党もバックにいわゆる軍事産業とか原子力産業とかそういう資本に操られたまんま今まで来てますね。要するにアメリカのも含めて。だから本当の意味での国民の政府になってないと思いますよ。
But to learn more about the thinking of those ordinary Japanese citizens who have turned against nuclear power, we had to go to the outskirts of the capital region. In a pleasant coastal area, about an hour from Tokyo by train, is this beach community. This is an unassuming and normal-looking muffin shop, but this evening it has become the headquarters of a community of activists, trying to grope forward toward a strategy by which to convince their government to shut down all of its nuclear reactors and to focus the nation on the development of renewable energies. It was a striking occasion in many respects. Many people flowed in and out of the 4-hour meeting. We estimated that there were eventually more than 40 participants by the time the proceedings were closed. It was a diverse group, from energetic business owners to pregnant women to university students. Most of the time was spent with each person offering their own stories about how they had come to join the anti-nuclear movement. Many of them said they didn't really know what they could do to change their nation's energy policy. But after the Fukushima Daiichi disaster, sitting home and doing nothing was simply no longer an option for them.
みんなと同じ思いをシェアできることで、今自分が思っていること、感じていることを、改めて自分に気づかせることができたというのと、あとみんなが同じ思いでいてくれることがすごく心強かった。からとてもいい機会に参加できて嬉しいです。
But it was also a meeting about strategy and ways that ordinary people could carry on their resistance against a government that was refusing to hear their voices and to respond sincerely.
ゴールは一つだと思います。だけどその道っていうのはたくさんあると思います。どの方法を選ぶかはたくさんあると思います。だけどそういうことを僕たちはとにかくゴールを目指そうよっていうことを確認できるっていうのがすごく素晴らしいと思っています。
The growing strength of the anti-nuclear community was evident as experiences were shared, protest activities were planned, and new information was distributed. There are, however, deeper complexities to the issue of nuclear power in Japan as well. This part of the story takes us much further from the capital city of Tokyo. Indeed, what we are hunting for now can only be found along the most remote areas of the Japanese coastline. We are heading toward a nuclear power plant. This may look like an idyllic Japanese coastal village. Indeed, it is a place where many people live off the sea. Some of them are fishermen, and others operate pleasure craft for tourists that come from all over. But although there are no big signs, or a sense that anything is amiss, not 100 yards up this nondescript road lies an unexpected facility. We are now at the Oi nuclear power plant in Fukui Prefecture, As you see, we have reached the guard gate and can go no further. The Oi nuclear power plant features the very first nuclear reactors to be switched back on after the Fukushima Daiichi disaster. And thus the police stood ready at the gates, watching our every move as we watched them. They had already confronted dozens of anti-nuclear activists at this very spot, and their orders were to let no one, not even media representatives like us, sneak a peek at the power plant beyond the tunnel. But really, it was the people in the village next to the nuclear power plant that we were most interested in. After all, if a reactor should ever have a meltdown or other major accident at Oi, these neighborhoods would be the first to become a ghost town, like those that we have seen in Fukushima. And bearing in mind that geologists are now reporting that an active earthquake fault lies in immediate proximity to this place, aren't the people concerned about the prospect of nuclear doom?
もともとここ原子力発電ができてからそうですね30年40年近くになるんですよ。それでずっと原子力発電1号2号3号4号と起動しとったから地元の人として地元のもんとしてはそれだけ今度再起動については抵抗というか再起動することについては心配はなかったですけどね。
He went on to say that the continued operation of the plant was necessary for the economy of the local community. Indeed, it is often the case that it is the municipalities in which Japan's nuclear power plants are located where political support for them is the strongest. And why not? Not only do they bring high-paying jobs to otherwise isolated and poor communities, but they also dish out development funds for the construction of modern town offices and lavish sports facilities and much else. This is Play Park Oi, a recreational area reportedly constructed by funds donated by the power company which operates the local nuclear reactor. It's hard to miss the monument standing in the center of the park, celebrating the peace and prosperity that nuclear power allegedly brings. But here too, the current struggle is in evidence, as anti-nuclear activists have scribbled graffiti on the monument and in other parts of the park. This city mascot now totes a fan with a simple question: why nuclear power? Nearby is the anti-nuclear activists' camp, which they call Occupy Oi. We asked an activist why he was living here.
大井原発再稼働されてしまったけれども意思表示それは違うというそのためにここにいてます。
Most of his colleagues had already left the camp because the reactivation of the Oi nuclear reactors at the beginning of July represented, for the activists, a battle lost. But as any struggle has its reverses and setbacks, the final decision must come from here, Nagata-cho, the realm of Japan's politicians. Remarkably, the influence of Japan's so-called nuclear village is so strong that both the ruling party and the largest opposition party have adopted a pro-nuclear energy stance at a time when 60 or 70% of the general public has now come into the anti-nuclear camp. This lack of political responsiveness to the will of the people is frustrating even to those politicians who have strong links to the citizens' movement. They note that popular protests have historically had little impact on Japanese government policies.
戦後の日本の大衆運動を考えると、60年安保とか70年安保とかですね、そういう世代、私は70年安保世代なんですけれどもね、そういう時代とちょっと違うのはですね、やはり女性とかで若いお母ちゃんたちとか多くの市民がですね参加してる。ですから我々はこれをアジサイ革命というふうに言ってるんですね。ですからこれが本当の意味で社会にじわっとですね大きく広がっていくんじゃないかという期待をね私たち持っているんですね。
Even national politicians like Mr. Hattori offer harsh criticisms of the behavior of Japan's political administration and its business leaders.
大井原子力発電所の再稼働についてね、野田総理は国民の生活を守るためだと言いました、ね、ですから要するに産業界に電気が供給できないということによって、産業が立ち行かなくなるというか破壊されるということを意識したんだろうと思うんですけれども、しかしそれはね全くの嘘で西日本で電力を融通すればね、日本全国でお互いが分かち合えば関西だけの問題じゃないんですよね。日本全国で電気を供給することは可能だということはもう国自身が認めていることなんですね。
Mixed into the crowds at some of the larger popular protests, there are other national politicians as well, who say that they are outraged as individual citizens of the nation. They believe that the government and TEPCO's energy policies are based on lies.
電力不足、原発を動かさなければ電力が不足するというのは嘘です。で、原発を動かさなければ電力料金が値上げをされる、これも嘘です。原発を動かさなくても電力は足りるし、電気料金を値上げをする必要はないというふうに私は確信をしています。
It may be somewhat surprising to note that, so far, the protests are just getting bigger and stronger in the months since the Fukushima Daiichi catastrophe occurred. The shock of last year's events seems to have given way to a deep determination to force the government-big business combination to bend to the will of the people. Where once they trusted and followed, now the Japanese people are making a firm demand of their leaders that nuclear power cannot be part of the nation's future.
原発の恐ろしさっていうのは福島でも、アメリカなら3マイル、チェルノブイリ、非常に危険度が大きいんですね。日本が50基以上あります。いつでも地震が来ればぶっ壊れる可能性があります。津波でもそうです。
日本人の技術はすごいよね。
自分は親戚などが福島第一原発や浜岡原発の近くに住んでいたこともありまして、非常に日本は地震や火山大国なので心配をしていたところ。
薄汚い金。
原発の利益誘導体っていうんですか、大きな電力会社とか土建だとかそういうところの利益にはなるけども、日本の国民にとっては決して利益にならないと思います。むしろ命に対する危険ですよねの方が大きいと思うんです。そういうものをやっぱり人類は選ぶべきじゃないというふうに現在時点ではそういう技術だと思いますので、
そこを忘れちゃいけないよ。
今勉強している限りの知識なんですけれども、大企業とかその の原発をね作ってる会社とかが設けるためのその仕組みなんだなっていうのを今勉強していて、政府はその大企業とかから献金とかをもらってるので、それのせいで今原発に依存してるのだと思います。
日本の一番悪いのは政府、財界、大学、マスメディア、これがもう一体となっちゃってる。要は日本では原子力村と言いますけど、僕らに言わせれば村じゃなくてマフィアです。マフィア、原子力マフィア、そういうのも構築しちゃって、その既得権益を彼らは守ろうとしている。そのためにはもう国民の命なども自分らの権益、既得権益を守ろうとして、今言った政官財学マスメディア、これが一体となっちゃってる。この構図をなんとかもう突き破ろうとして、今市民一人一人がそれをやっと気がついて今立ち上がっているという現状で、今世界各国で起きている、市民革命、そういう意味ではこのまさしく今日本で起きている市民、僕は革命だと思います。これ戦後初めての経験ですね。
悪いのでやめました。迷惑なのでやめました。必要ないのでやめました。あなたも同じ思いなら今すぐ原発やめましょう。